So you're thinking about buying a house in Kansas City. What's to know? Well, where do you even begin? Hi, I'm Rachel Kilmer. I'm a local real estate agent in the Kansas City metro area, licensed in both Kansas and Missouri. The truth is, there is a ton to know about buying a house anywhere. I actually have a guide designed to educate buyers on the basic steps of buying a house. I'd be happy to send over to you. Just shoot me an email, shoot me a text, and I'll get that in your hands. But in Kansas City specifically, there are some weird quirks about buying a house, especially if you've done it elsewhere or are familiar with the standard policies and protocols in other states and cities. So today I'm going to teach you about all of the weird, quirky things about buying a house right here in KC. One of the first things you'll notice when you're buying a house in Kansas City is the various types of architecture and floor plans that are available here in the metro. I have a whole separate video kind of diving into the architectural side of it, so definitely go check that out because it is super interesting. We have a ton of options here. But the floor plans are really different. So the biggest floor plan that I get comments on from people out of state is, what is the deal with all of those split levels? And a split level home is basically where on the ground level you have the garage and maybe a small family room. You go up a half a set of stairs and then land on an entryway, and then go up the second half of stairs, and then you're on the main level where most of the house is. They are everywhere. And the reason is they are more affordable for builders to build, so they just put up a lot of them. And they tend to be kind of the only new construction option in a first-time home buyer budget for the most part. But split levels, you'll see them everywhere. And if you're not in an area where they're super popular, they look kind of funky if you're not used to seeing them with your eyes. So that is one of the weird quirks about the floor plans of houses in Kansas City. Another one is Kansas Cityans and a lot of Midwesterners are all about our basement. And some of that is practical. Yes, it's great shelter in the case of a tornado. And yes, it's nice to have the storage. But some of that is just kind of preference to the people that live in Kansas City. So basements in newer homes are typically finished. And by finished, I mean like a really nice livable space. It feels just like you're sitting in the upstairs when you're in the basement. It's not like a old creepy basement like you see in a lot of older homes, which we do have those as well. But a lot of people from out of state and out of town are very surprised at how nice some of the basements are in Kansas City. Another thing is that a lot of Kansas Cityans are absolutely insistent on having a walkout basement, which means it has a door in it that walks straight out to the backyard. That is like literally a deal breaker on probably, I'm gonna say like 40% of the transactions I do. Those buyers say they absolutely must have a walkout basement. So those are some of the quirks with floor plans here in Kansas City. One of the things that I hear a lot too is I'll refer to a reverse ranch. And what I mean by that is a ranch home that has a basement that walks out. And I've heard a lot of people from other cities and other states like, what is a reverse ranch? So some of it's just jargon, but definitely a lot of interesting, unique floor plans here in Kansas City. Another quirky thing about buying a house in Kansas City is things you need to know during the inspection period, which when you're moving here from out of state, will you know these things? Probably not. Well, how would you know them? But it's really important to have an agent that does know them and can educate you through the process. The two things that are most surprising to clients that are moving here from out of state are the radon inspection and foundations here. Radon is a gas that comes up from the ground that we have here in the Kansas City area, and it's in parts of the Midwest. It's basically produced by uranium, and it's one of the highest cancer-causing materials that we know of currently. So it's really important that if you have high levels of radon, you get it mitigated. Basically, you just put a test in there. It sits there for 48 hours usually, and then it comes back and tells you a number on a scale. And if it's below 3, then they say you don't have to install mitigation. If it's above 3, then they say it's a safety hazard and can cause cancer, and you install mitigation. Mitigation is they literally just like drill a hole in the ground, stick a pipe in it, and then they put a little fan in it and it pumps the gas out through your house. It's really not that huge of a deal to be taken care of, but it is a huge deal to have lurking in your house and not know about it. So radon is something that a lot of people moving to Kansas City aren't familiar with, and they definitely should be if they're purchasing a home. Another thing that surprises people that are moving to Kansas City if they're not familiar with basements is the whole concept of the foundation. Because on a slab home, the foundation's pretty simple. It's kind of just a slab of concrete. Sometimes it's on joists, sometimes it's under joists, so on and so forth. In Kansas City, when you have a basement, it's walls, it's a structure in your basement. And what's surprising to people is the old homes, the older houses with those basements do tend to leak, especially if they were built with like limestone. They're basically just like limestone chunks. And it's like, yeah, this basement smells like a basement. And what we mean by that is it smells really moist and damp because water does get in those old foundations. They're almost kind of designed to let it seep in a little bit. So those are basements you don't finish. You don't want them finished because you know eventually they're going to let water in. Vice versa, the newer foundation, the poured concrete foundations, if you've never seen one before without walls on it, can kind of freak you out if it has any cracks in it at all. But some cracks are okay, some are not, some are medium scary, some are a lot scary, and there's a lot of foundation repairs that can be done to it. So it's really important that you have a foundation expert in your life or a real estate agent that can refer you to one, because foundations can be big and scary here, and it's something that not a lot of people know about, especially from an area where basements just are not the norm. There are a couple of quirky things about paperwork during a real estate transaction in Kansas City. I learned these from clients that have moved here from out of state, and they go, "What do you mean there's no lawyer involved?" Or "What do you mean there's no survey to be done?" And what I mean by these two things is in a lot of major cities, I know California, I know the Chicago area, there's a real estate lawyer that is involved in the transaction, actually attends the closing, approves the paperwork, and a lot of times they actually do the closing. In the Kansas City area, their lawyers have approved all the paperwork. It's contracts that attorneys have written, but there's not a lawyer involved in every single transaction. Usually who's involved in the transaction is a real estate agent, two real estate agents, one for the buyer, one for the seller, a title company or two. Sometimes the buyer and seller have different title companies, and then a lender. And those parties all see the whole transaction all the way through. So no lawyers involved unless something really spicy comes up, which does happen from time to time. The other thing that's a little quirky about the paperwork here is there's not a survey required on just about any property. There are some exceptions if you're building and rezoning, so on and so forth. But just for a good old standard real estate transaction, there's no survey that's required to be done. A lot of states do require a survey, or they require them more frequently than we do here in Kansas and Missouri. So that's something that if you really want to have a survey, make sure you speak up and have it done, because it's not going to just naturally happen as a part of your real estate transaction. Another quirky part about buying a house in Kansas City is that it does sit on two different states. That means there are different laws in both states. A lot of really small kind of nuanced differences between the two states. One of those differences is really particular to the real estate world. The state of Kansas does not allow dual representation, meaning a real estate agent can't represent both a buyer and a seller legally. The state of Kansas doesn't think that's possible to ethically do. The state of Missouri disagrees. The state of Missouri does allow agents to act as a dual agent. My company, my team's policy, we don't do that. We don't think it's possible or ethical either, but just kind of a small detail of the difference in the law between Missouri and Kansas. There's differences in all kinds of laws, seatbelt laws, liquor store laws, all kinds of differences, but something to really be aware of as you're looking to purchase a home in the Kansas City area is which side of the state line it's on, because you'll want to know what are the rules and regulations over there. Again, another difference between the two different states is the taxes, the way the taxes are orchestrated, how much taxes are, and that even breaks down more specifically to county and city to city. So that is something that's kind of quirky about purchasing in Kansas City, is that you could be in an entirely different state and be one block away. One of the last quirks about buying a house in Kansas City is the civic pride. I touched on this in a previous video where we talked all about the unexpected things about living in Kansas City, but this is especially true if you're purchasing a home, because then you are really loyal to that neighborhood, that city, that county, that state, because that is where you have put down some at least semi-permanent roots. Some things that are really local that have surprised some of my out-of-state buyers about buying a house in Kansas City is the accessibility to local farmers markets. We have farmers markets in literally every single town in this entire metro, from the tiny farm towns to the Kansas City farmers market at the river market and everything in between. You will be surprised how accessible fresh produce is for you if you just seek out a local farmers market. So a lot of really quirky things about buying a home in Kansas City that make it kind of fun and interesting. And honestly, it is a great place to buy a home, but you want to know what you're doing. So I would be happy to walk you through that process. I am a local real estate agent licensed in both Kansas and Missouri, and would be happy to chit chat anytime about all things floor plans, inspections, paperwork, Kansas versus Missouri, civic pride, all the good stuff. For now, don't be afraid to hit subscribe and watch some more videos here on YouTube where we talk about all things Kansas City. Thanks for watching. See you next time.